This program is sponsored by Numbers USA.
Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Hi, Truth Warriors and Mythbusters. Isn't that weather something out there? I was reluctant. I was reluctant to come in. It's raining so hard. Let me say this first: that I see that the Senate bill regarding the immigration issue, our border control issue, has been released, and everyone's talking about it on X. And this Senate bill, is a fiasco. Is that the word? No, because catastrophe. That's the word. It goes nowhere. It codifies the invasion of America. It allows the secretary may use its authority if there are 4,000 or more aliens encountered each day. That's 28,000 per week, 121,000 a month, or 1.46 million a year. But he must act when there are more than 5,000 a day over a week, or 8,500 in a single day. It's the invasion. I can't believe we're in this position. I've been talking about the illegal alien business since I started the show, 5.5 years ago? I have a wonderful guest today. We're going to talk about, I like to bring in subjects or give my listeners information about subjects that I know nothing about. And we're going to talk about big tech and how big tech is actually and that's not the word I want to use, eavesdropping or spying on the American people. We're going to talk about the necessity for a parallel infrastructure and why we must get off the matrix, so to speak. So my guest is Sean Patrick Tario, and I want to welcome you to the Naked Truth Report, Sean.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we have something in common. We were both purged from LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yes, that definitely happened.
Well, and
they didn't like the fact that I was countering the narratives that were constantly pushed out there, and when I changed when they kept reminding me that I needed to put my pronouns in, and I made my pronouns awakened, things went downhill real quick, and then I started quote unquote violating their terms of service for things that they couldn't even explain to me exactly what I was saying or doing. But
yeah, well, let's listen. Give us a little. As I said, we're going to be talking about getting out of the matrix and why a parallel economy or infrastructure is needed. But before you get into that, why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I'm. It's interesting because I have a very eclectic background, but at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a technologist. I am a follower of Christ. I'm a father. I'm a husband. And I've been learning how to and have been taught at a very young age. I'm 43 now, but when I was 14, my father, being born and raised in Chicago, taught me to follow the money. And really taught me, made me sit down and watch. I'm sure you've probably heard of the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Mm-hmm, yes. I've mentioned it on the show, yeah.
Yeah, so it's about the history of money and banking and the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor reserve. So at a very young age, I learned to just follow the money. And that if you can learn who has control and ownership of a company or a thing, and then you can learn the ethos of those people that have that control, you can then determine and see how they're going to act and react. And so for me, I went to university in Silicon Valley, and then I became an entrepreneur while I was in university, and then went into the data center industry and had a variety of different companies and startups over the years. But I've been a technologist in the software side and on the data center side. So this is the physical assets that store all of the servers and switches and routers that run the brave new digital world that we live in. A lot of people think of this cloud thing as just this ethereal thing that they don't quite understand. It's kind of like magic. And what I did is I worked in the physical space that actually made all this stuff run. So for me, it was never magic. I knew exactly what was going on and who the players were. And as I started following the money in the industry, it became very obvious that it was the same woke globalist capital that was running the venture capital firms in and around Silicon Valley, that had controlling interest stakes in the private equity firms, that had ownership of the real estate companies that owned the data centers and the hosting companies. And it all just kind of went back to that same, follow the money, look at the ethos. And so it became very clear for me, working in the industry, what the agenda was, and that they were going to be removing conservative individuals and content providers from the internet and making it so that we no longer had a presence online, so that they could completely control and dominate the narrative, which is exactly what we've seen play out over the last, 6, 7, 8 years. So I've spent my life over the last number of years, probably 5, 6 years, trying to spread awareness to anyone who will listen that this was going to happen. And as you can imagine, even in 2016, 2017, people would tell me, Sean, this is crazy. There's no way that Amazon Web Services or Google or Apple or any of these companies could kick us offline, can kick conservatives offline. This is America, Sean. We have the First Amendment. There's no way they would violate that. And I had to try to keep explaining to people, knowing what I've known since I was a young kid, that the folks that we're up against, they don't play by rules. They could care less about the Constitution. When they control the coinage and the courts, they play by a completely different set of rules where the ends justify the means. And so they will do whatever they need to do in order to accomplish their goals. So I'll be quiet now, but that's, a long story short.
But so what is their what is their goal? What is their motivation or their ultimate end or desire?
Well, I think, as we know, it's complete control of the narrative, right? They want people to believe what they want them to believe and only understand or think about the subjects that they want them to understand and think about. And that's where these devices, right, the cell phones that we all carry and the laptops and desktops that we have that we all use, that have operating systems, which is like the brain. It's the core of these devices that are owned by Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. If you have, the Amazon devices in your house, all of these operating systems are literally owned by the people that are trying to destroy us. They're trying to control everything. And in really, as I'm sure you probably know, Kathleen, it's a depopulation agenda. That's what they're aiming towards, and a control agenda. So if they have access, let me just ask you this. Would you say that we're at war right now, Kathleen?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that you say we're in a spiritual and kinetic war. I listened to Steve Bannon's War Room, and he mentions that all the time.
Right.
Yeah, and I have some of his guests on this show. And in fact, one of the guys who talks about AI and how that's alienating. So it's a spiritual and kinetic war that we're in, and I've learned that from Steve Bannon. So we have to take it more seriously, and we're not taking it seriously enough.
Right. So Let me just ask you this basic question, and this kind of puts it all into context. If you believe that we're at war and I'm sending you off into battle, and I give you a weapon, and I tell you that this weapon that I'm going to give you has a GPS tracking device on it, a camera, and a microphone that is all turned on, and it's all that information is being fed to the enemy that you're about to go fight, would you use that weapon?
No, I would not.
Of course not, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a silly question. Mm-hmm. And yet everybody is walking around with these tools, because a phone, your mobile phone, your smartphone, and your laptop, they're really just tools. But these tools are literally owned and controlled by the enemy. They're owned and controlled by Apple and Amazon and Google, and all the applications on them are also controlled by literally the people who are spending tens of billions of dollars a year, if not more, on candidates and causes and organizations that are hell-bent, truly hell-bent, on destroying us and destroying the truth that we are trying to bring to people and the sovereignty that we are trying to bring to people and the message of Christ that we're trying to bring to people. So that, when you understand that, and you start to realize that these devices that we carry around with us are not ours, they're really in control of big tech. We just happen to use them. We literally pay them for the privilege of them to spy on us and to have full access to our GPS, full access to what we're saying when we're around the phones. Because I'm sure you and others who are listening have had it happen where you talked about something and then you started seeing ads on Facebook and on Google or on Apple or on any browser that you're on. You're like, how the heck did it know that I was talking about these things? Well, it's because your phone is literally listening to all of your conversations. So from a marketing perspective, it's brilliant, right? But what we've done is we've given up our privacy to these companies and by proxy to the spy agencies that have full access to all of these devices.
We're giving up our freedom, and we're actually paying for it ourselves. And we're even paying for ourselves. We're paying for our own demise. And you can see that with the illegal alien business, right? And so it's
100%.
it's omnipresent, it's omniscient, it's everywhere. Okay, and we're funding it ourselves. So this so we've got to start waking up, and we've got to start building an alternative infrastructure, you say, a parallel infrastructure.
Yeah, and it drives me crazy, like when I hear, a lot of the big, I'm going to call them talking heads, who are in even the patriot side of the movement here to spread truth and love. They'll preach, let's boycott Anheuser-Busch, let's boycott Liberty Safes, Ben and Jerry's, you name it, we're going to boycott all these different companies. But for whatever reason, they don't talk about boycotting big tech when they are literally exponentially more responsible for the demise and the situation that we are in right now. When we know for a fact that when you go into the browser and you're using Google browser or you're using your Apple, what's called Safari browser, and you search for certain keywords, that those companies can control what you see. They can control what information is fed back to you. We know that these companies are doing it. We've known it for many, many years. And yet, for some reason, people just continue to feed these companies our information and our data. So I'm going to stop talking about the problem set because I think it's blatantly obvious at this point that this is a problem. We need to stop providing these companies all of our information, all of our data. And so what I've been really focused on over the last 3-4 years of my life is, okay, so what, right? What can we do about it? So I've been building the infrastructure, and I've been helping to support the companies that have the tools and the data centers and the hosting and the servers and the network and the capacity that are on our team, right? And teaching people about all the other devices, so the operating systems that they can use that are not owned by Google, that are not owned by Apple, that are not owned by Microsoft, that are not owned by the companies that are literally trying to kill us. So supporting those who are in the fight, who are on our team, and giving them information and training people on how to use these tools.
And this is your ghost phone.
Yeah, so the ghost phone is really just a phone that's using an open source operating system. Anybody can literally go do this themselves. But it's not everyone has the technical acumen and the skill set to do it. And so we have it available for those who don't have that technical acumen and the skill set to grab one of these phones, make sure that it's what we call OEM unlockable so that you can change the operating system on the device. And then we preload it with about 15 different applications so that people don't have to try to figure out which are the best ones that are open source that accomplish things like your VPN or your browser, and various different applications, or your mapping application, so that you can, still get from point A to point B, but you're doing it with a tool and an application that is not taking your information, feeding it into a cloud that is controlled by a company, again, that just wants to monetize you and destroy you, and trying to say, well, what can we sell to this person as they're trying to get to Starbucks or as they're trying to get to whatever they're trying to get to. It's all done on the device. So that's really our focus, is really getting people to shift their mindset and change the way that they're doing things, and really what they're using and how they're using it, and really educating people. Because if you're going to use something as sophisticated as a smartphone or a laptop or a desktop, we view it the same as someone who's using a firearm. You don't just start using a firearm without any basic training. You have to have some kind of training so that you don't go out into public and end up shooting yourself or shooting the people around you. And unfortunately, people are so uneducated about how these things work, which we think is by design, I truly believe it's by design that they've made these things so convenient and so easy and simple to use that people don't even question what's really happening and what's really going on with these devices, and that they're stealing all of your information and all your data. And I can go on and on and on this topic, but there are so many different ways that people can reclaim their data and reclaim their ownership of
and reclaim their autonomy and freedom. And so you offer a boot camp.
Correct. Yeah, I travel the country. I've been doing it for 14, 15 months at this point, all over the country, meeting with groups and organizations that are actually wanting to learn how that they can stop feeding their data and their information to these big tech companies that are trying to, enslave us and kill us. So that's really my primary focus. And I have a mountain of information online. If you go to the mark37.com, our website, we have all kinds of tutorials and articles that I've written on how people can start reclaiming their digital sovereignty, and links to different companies that we vetted, and interviews that I've done with owners of these different companies who, for me, I want to follow the money, right? So someone who just says, oh, I have something that is for patriots, right? I'm like, okay, are you really a patriot? Let's sit down, let's break bread, let's have a conversation, let's see if your actions actually follow your words. And so that's really my focus, is trying to vet these companies and these organizations and these individuals and make sure they actually are on the same team, so that we're all in it fighting towards the same cause here.
Yeah, and and I think with this recent invasion that we're experiencing of illegal aliens, people are now, that's the most important issue. That is, initially it was inflation, but now exit polls show that the invasion of illegal aliens is the most important issue facing. And now with the war expanding presumably in the Middle East, you see, everything is out of control.
Yeah.
And yet we're addicted to these devices. And these devices aren't really serving us in so many ways. The devices are actually betraying us.
Well, 100%, and they were designed to do that, right? And if you talk to or you hear interviews from the engineers who develop these tools and these applications, and you just ask them, like, would you allow your kids to use these things? They say, oh, heck no. There's no way we would let my kids use these things, because they know how addictive it is. They know how dangerous they are to our kids, and yet they're constantly pushed out to our kids. And when you just look at the sheer amount of time that people spend wasting their time, just scrolling through mindless entertainment or playing mindless games like Candy Crush or whatever it is, I just look at that and I just weep for our youth, and I weep for humanity, because we're just not focused on the things that we need to be focused on. And when you take into, on top of that, the reality that they're only feeding you the information that they want you to see because they control the device, it adds that additional layer of like, oh no. So we need to, as a society, to wake up that this is real, this is happening, and we need to start making a shift and a change in our behavior. Because as I know, Kathleen, how many of the media stations are actually talking about what's happening on the border right now?
Well, our society has been degraded. Is that the word? We are alienated from God. We need to get back. We're going backwards. We're regressing. We need to get back to God. Humanity is being destroyed, and the devices are helping to destroy us. And now, with AI coming aboard, you see everything is just chaotic, and you see who's at the helm. This incompetent Manchurian president. You see, so it's like we're in a bad state, and we must pray and hope God saves us. I'm not kidding, because it's too much. We're juggling. We're in this muddle. We're in the mud, so to speak. You know what I mean? It's like man getting out of the mud or something, or the sludge. We have regressed. Our culture. It's worse than it's ever been. I never anticipated that things would be this bad. Did you?
I did, in part because, as I said, a long time ago, I started learning about what was going on. So, for example, on 9/11, when everyone was like feeding into this narrative of, oh, we need to enter this mindless endless war against terrorism, right? I was sitting here saying this is a controlled demolition. We just watched three controlled demolitions of Building 7 and the two Twin Towers. I read the Patriot Act when I was 20 years old. I said this is going to be a horrific affront to our privacy. And I was yelling to everyone around me that could hear me, and they were all telling me I was a crazy conspiracy theorist. And yet everything has come true to a T. So unfortunately, I have kind of seen this controlled, I call it controlled demolition of our country, right? That's what we're watching. It is a controlled demolition. If you even read the UN Charter and you looked at the history of the United Nations, you look at the history of even the public education system, the history of our medical industry, like these are all ticking time bombs that were created intentionally to create the paradigm that we're in now. However, I think that all things are happening in God's timeline. I know for a fact that good times create soft men and women, and soft men and women create really hard times, but really hard times create strong men and women. So we are in that point in time right now where many people are waking up in droves. They're starting to realize that they need to turn towards Christ, and they need to turn towards God for answers. In fact, that's exactly why we call the business Mark 3:7, because if you go to Mark 3:7, that's where Jesus has officially pissed off the Pharisees because he was healing people on the Sabbath and doing things that the Pharisees thought were antithetical to their law. And so he went down to the sea, and it says, and the masses followed him from all over. And so we believe we're in that time where people are realizing that what's going on around them is not working, and they're looking for truth, and they're dropping everything around them that is not truth, and they're seeking truth, and they're turning and changing their behavior. Because if you think about that time, when people did that, they left their families, they left their jobs, they didn't know where they were going to sleep, they didn't know what they were going to eat, they didn't know where they were going to go to the bathroom. I mean, they didn't know. They just knew that there was a figure who was speaking truth and creating miracles, and they wanted to go follow that person. And we think that I believe that we're in that time, and our team does as well. And so that's really why we focused on that name, and I believe that we're in those times right now.
Okay, we're speaking with Sean Patrick Tario. Are you open to taking phone calls?
100%. Yes.
Okay. We're talking with Sean Patrick Tario. We're talking about why we must escape. We can't be destroyed, folks. That's what Truth Warriors, hey, my Truth Warriors know the truth. They're on the same page. When we come back from the break, we're going to take phone calls, and we're going to delve into this deeper. Okay, we'll be right back.
But clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides
now. We're joined by Sean Patrick Tario as my guest, and he's helping us to figure out how we're going to get out of this matrix, folks. The touch points for Sean's platform are, let's see, I lost it. Unafraid to work on the front lines of the war we are in, operating with eyes wide open, unapologetic in their faith, and supporting the America First platform. Hey, my Truth Warriors support all those touch points. I think all those bullet points. I know they do. They're on the same page as me. I love my Truth Warriors. They're very loyal listeners, right? And we're all going to go out and get involved with with Sean's boot camp. Why don't we take a call now from Antoinette? Hi, Antoinette. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Hi, you guys. Good evening. You know, Sean, I love the fact that you brought up our Lord Jesus Christ. The fact that for the Lord loves justice, and he will never abandon the godly. He will keep them safe forever, but the children of the wicked will die, and that is Psalm 37. You know what, Sean, thank you so much for saying all this, because, like, I'm calling in, but I call in with my VPN, because I don't trust all those the technology gurus. They're collecting all our ideas, all our thoughts, and, you know, we can't let them do this to us. And thank you so much for discussing what you're talking about tonight.
I appreciate that. And just so you know, a VPN is a good thing. It's a means to remain anonymous But just as I've been saying, you have to follow the money. Unfortunately, there are a lot of VPN companies that are owned and controlled by either our own CIA via their proxies that have venture capital and investing arms, or they're owned and controlled by the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad, or they're owned and controlled by various other Chinese actors. That's where getting educated and smart about all this stuff and how it actually operates and works is so important, because we hear keywords like, well, I use a VPN, so I'm safe, right? But you may or may not be. It depends on what you're really doing and how you're using it. Because if you're also using a VPN from a Google Android device or an iPhone, then if I have control of your operating system on that device, I see what you see. I hear what you hear. So it renders the encryption that you may be using or a VPN completely useless. Does that make sense?
Yes. So then, Sean, can you make a list or some website that you know of that you can present to us so we can go in and correct ourselves? Because
yes,
Proton,
it's already there. It's already there. If you go to mark37.com and you go to the blog section, it's called Resources and Guidelines to Boycott Big Tech. And I have the whole presentation that I give. It's right there for you to watch. And then I go through whether it's browsers or VPN companies or Zoom alternatives and Microsoft Teams alternatives, Office 365 alternatives, Microsoft Office alternatives, all these different alternatives that exist that are out there. But because these organizations and companies, to include myself, my own business, we're not sitting on billions of dollars that we can push out in marketing, right? It all is through word of mouth. So it's all there. People just need to start playing around with it and using it, and then telling their friends and family.
It's mark37.com, Antoinette. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
One more question. Sean, what about Proton for my emails? Because that's what I'm trying to use too. Are they compromised as well then?
So, again, you have to follow the money. Where did the money come from for Proton Mail? Who were the venture capital firms that put money into them? Where did the management team from Proton Mail come from? Why is it called Proton Mail? And this is all facts. This is all documented facts. I actually have another organization that I operate called Information on Demand. If you go to Intel, INTELOD.net, intelondemand.net, intelod.net, we have a whole dossier on Proton Mail. But the short version is it's called Proton Mail because the whole executive team came from CERN, CERN, which is the super collider in the Netherlands. If you've heard of it, it's the team and the ethos behind what they're doing there is very evil. It's very bad news. And the money that was put into that business is also very tied to the whole globalist agenda as well. So for us personally, we used to use Proton Mail until we started doing the research and we said, oh no, what are we going to do? This is not good. So we've been migrating over to another company that's called Paxmail, PAXmail.cc, Paxmail.cc, which is on that website, on that link that I mentioned before. There's another great company called StartMail, START Mail. Both of them are email service providers that are owned and operated by constitutional, conservative, God-fearing patriots.
Okay, Antoinette, thank you. Let me take another call from Linda. Hi, Linda. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Sean, I have a few questions to ask you. The first one is there a phone number, because I do not have a smartphone, I just have a flip phone. And also, can you, spell and pronounce the name of the phone? And if they also come in flip phones as well.
So I don't think I heard part of the question, but the fact that you're using a flip phone is better because there's not very much data that can be pulled off of your flip phone. It's super basic, right? And the more basic, the better at the end of the day in terms of less information and data can be stored. The tough part is we've been looking And if there's anyone out there that can find one, but we've been looking at flip phones and trying to find a operating system for a flip phone that is not owned by Google or is not owned by, there's a company called Kai, K-A-I-O-S, and they're the other flip phone operating system, which is a conglomerate between Google and a Chinese company, which is basically the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party. So unfortunately, there's no flip phones that we've been able to find that have operating systems, which is basically the brain of that phone, that are not owned by either Google or a Google CCP-owned entity. But I don't think I understood the other question that you had about phone numbers.
So can you spell and pronounce the name of your phone? Company.
It's Ghost Phone. It's really at the end of the day, it's a Pixel device. It's a Pixel phone, and we take everything Google off of that phone.
P-I-X-I-L?
P-I-X-E-L. P-I-X-E-L.
Linda, you can go to his website, mark37.com.
Right. Mark37.com is really where you want to go because you'll be able to learn. We have literally hundreds of questions, FAQs that customers have asked. You'll learn everything about the phone, what it does, what it doesn't do, all the applications that are preloaded on it. But if you go to mark37.com, you'll be able to learn all about it.
Oh, also the name of the company, my cell phone, I got my cell phone through is Lively. Lively is a senior citizen, for senior citizens. And I didn't even notice this until sometime after, I got the flip phone. I just was curious, what if there are any organizations that, sponsor you or anything like that. And they told me ERP.
Oh,
that's the only, that's the only one. None of these other left-wing organizations, just ERP.
Oh, okay, Linda, why don't you go to mark37.com and get some information?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Linda. So, listen, Sean, I wanted to ask you about, what was I looking at? Spiritual kinetic world. Oh, I wanted to ask you, how is this all interrelated in the sense that the Communist Chinese Party, where do they fit in this puzzle?
Which puzzle?
Just how
we're looking at a jigsaw puzzle, right? And there's lots of different pieces of the game here being played.
Well, in other words, globalism is what's taking place now. The agenda, the Davos folks, they want to they want to control. It's about control. And how does the CCP fit into that? Aren't they sort of trying to tell me your thoughts on where the CCP, how they fit into the whole thing about globalism?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it's a complex question. I think the Chinese, as a nation and as a people, through the CCP, are about their own autonomy. And they want China to be the predominant controller of world politics, primarily out of self-preservation and primarily out of just they believe, and this is where I think, I know you talk in your program a lot about racism and whatnot. It's interesting to me when I hear people say that, well, I'm Latino, so I can't be racist, or I'm Asian, so I can't be racist. I grew up in the Bay Area, where I spent a lot of time in the Bay Area as an adult, and I had friends of all kinds of different races and creeds and denominations and whatnot. And, the Chinese will full on admit and tell you that they are some of the most racist people on the planet. They believe that they, as a Chinese race, are superior to all other races, which is why many of them, loathe and despise the Japanese. They loathe and despise the Koreans, the Vietnamese, whatever it might be. So I believe that there's a big piece of that. And because their core is communist, they align, obviously, with the United Nations communist agenda and the World Economic Forum communist agenda. But I do believe that China is also very much acting in their own self-preservation. So they're going to use these tools that are out there, these global tools that are out there to simply try to benefit themselves as much as they can.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, they have controlled the manufacturing of so much of the hardware that is required in all of this tech that it becomes very frightening, as I think people are more and more waking up to, that they have access into a lot of these devices because of the fact that they made these devices.
And they are controlling the narrative in the sense that they own TikTok. Am I correct?
Yeah, they definitely do own TikTok. And if the crazy thing is, if you look at the algorithms that they use within their own country for their population that uses TikTok, for their youth, for example, the videos that are shown to their youth are videos about engineering, about making things, about building things, and obviously, rah-rah CCP. But that algorithm is kind of flipped on its head here in the United States and in Europe and elsewhere, where that content is shown, which is illicit content. It's the dumbing down type of content. It's not content that's trying to make people smarter and better and makers. It's trying to make people, dumber at the end of the day, and our kids dumber, wasting time on these services. But for me, TikTok is really no different than Facebook, is no different than Instagram, is no different than many of these other applications that people are wasting so much of their time on. And this is where I truly believe that if you're in Facebook or you're in LinkedIn even, and you're not preaching the gospel in that, I view it as a battlefront, right? That is a battlefront, a platform where you can preach the gospel. You need to be out in those platforms preaching the gospel. And if you're not doing that, get the heck off of that platform, because it is not going to serve you. You are a tool that is being used on that platform. And people will say, oh, my business, oh, I need it for this, that, and the other. Everyone has a million excuses. For me, it's no different than saying, oh, well, I need to go into the grocery store and buy Doritos or eat Oreos every day, all day. You really don't. There's alternatives. There's other ways for you to do things. You may have to go through a little bit of retooling and relearning, maybe a little bit of pain in the process, but you will come out the other side so much happier, so much more fulfilled in what you're doing. And Kathleen, one of the last things I want to say, because I know we're running out of time here, is that I look to the apostles and I look to the saints and I look at the lives that they led. And I know that I am called to be a saint, and I strive to be a saint on this planet. My life is not supposed to be super comfy, sitting back happy, super, comfy in my big house, not concerned about what's going on around me. I am called to the front lines, and I think we are all called to the front lines. And if we are not on some kind of list, right, and if we're not being attacked on a daily basis for the mess that we're putting out there, no matter where we are, whether we're out in the public domain talking to people at a grocery store or we're online, we're not doing something right. And when I look at my Lord and Savior at my death, and he says, Sean, you knew exactly what you were supposed to do, and you said you couldn't do it because you were afraid. You were afraid that preaching the gospel was going to turn people away from your business or turn people away from whatever. He's going to say, depart from me, get away from me. I don't know you, right? So that's what drives me every day, is I live fearless doing what I'm doing, because I know I'm up against major powers with major money who are going to attack me, but I know I have the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings on my team, who raises the dead and moves mountains, and he's going to be supporting and protecting me and my family throughout the whole process.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing to say. And, I have 40,000 listeners each Sunday, and if I could get them to come to your boot camp, how could we arrange something like that, you think? I mean, not all 40,000s, but, if I could get a group of listeners, truth warriors, I call my listeners truth warriors and mythbusters. If I could get a group to come to one of your boot camps, could we arrange something like that?
100%. So I do both live events and virtual events, so we could do it online as well. And maybe we can talk after the show and maybe arrange a virtual event or a live event. I was in Southern California in June of last year, in Orange and in Pasadena, and in, I forget where else I was, but I was all over Southern California doing live events, but I've done many virtual events as well, so that, I can go through the training and then people can ask questions and we can hopefully all grow together. And also give out your information where people can find your
information, your website and all that good stuff. And also, you wrote a book recently. Talk about your book. Mention your book.
Yes, the book I wrote was actually a number of years ago when it was about the data center industry. So it was kind of demystifying that data center industry and helping people follow the money and understand who the players were and what their motivations were. And it was really educational for people who are in the industry. So I traveled the world training people in the data center industry about the data center industry and executives and whatnot. And I still do a lot of work with different infrastructure providers to that extent, primarily working with those who are actually trying to build businesses rooted in truth and love and actually trying to support the cause that we're in right now. So that's the book. But the website is mark37.com. If you're interested if you have a community of people that meet on a regular basis, so you're meeting monthly or every other week or even every week, a lot of the different prepper groups and whatnot, they're very motivated. And so I'm traveling around meeting with a lot of those organizations and groups, and coming live to meet with them or doing virtual events. But if you have a type of group like that that's meeting on a regular basis, so Kathleen, your group and your audience is a perfect example. We can set something up where we just set a date and a time and a place, and then I come and I can present and do what I do and hopefully help raise people's awareness so that they can operate with more situational awareness in the digital domain.
Yeah, and get more informed. So Sean's website is mark37.com. I'll speak to you after we finish the show, and we maybe can work something out. We can arrange something. So this is Sean Patrick Tario. We're talking about escaping the matrix and building an alternative or parallel infrastructure. He has the Ghost Phone. You can check it out at mark37.com. Sean, thank you for being a guest on the show.
You're very, very welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'll talk to you after the show. Thank you, Truth Warriors, Mythbusters. It's raining cats and dogs out there, so I'm going to drive real slow getting home because, my driving has been kind of weird lately. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. It's like an inside joke. But anyway, we'll be back next week, and I appreciate you guys. Thanks. Bye.
This program was sponsored by Numbers USA.
Numbers USA is the largest grassroots advocacy organization in the United States with over 8 million members and supporters. Numbers USA's sole focus is immigration, and it believes better immigration policy is both needed and possible. Founded solely by author Roy Beck in 1996 to champion the recommendations of the National Commission on Immigration, chaired by civil rights icon Barbara Jordan. In his latest book, Back of the Hiring Line, Roy Beck clearly shows how high immigration has, in wave after wave, adversely and disproportionately impacted Black American jobs and wealth. Today, America is faced with an unprecedented influx of illegal immigrants flooding into our country by the millions. This influx disproportionately impacts Black Americans as well as first-generation Latino Americans and legal immigrants lawfully pursuing naturalization. Numbers USA continues to advocate for sensible immigration policies that ensures American safety, promotes economic fairness while protecting the environment and quality of life. To get a copy of Roy's book, Back of the Hiring Line, visit backofthehiringline.com or on Amazon and learn more about Numbers USA. Take action and get involved now by logging on to numbersusa.com. That's numbersusa.com.